My name is Brian. My wife and mother go to psychics and believe all the hocus pocus. Not me. I'm a skeptic. But this right here, is my ghost story. I'm a reseller. I buy at garage sales and thrift stores. No bullshit. I support my family with the items no one cares about anymore. Most items find their way into the secondhand waste stream when a person dies. A family member passes away and the next of kin either doesn't think there's anything of value, or they're so caught up with their own lives and jobs that they don't have the time to go through this stuff. They need to sell the house to pocket the cash, so they hire a junk removal service or rent a U-Haul and away the items go. You wouldn't believe the items I have found. Liechtenstein signed lithographs, 17th century wine beakers, bronze statues, and enough gold to pay an entry-level teacher salary for 2 years. I buy the items, take them home, list them on eBay, throw in a 27-gallon black and yellow tote from Home Depot, and then they sit in the basement until they sell. Could be next week, or 4 years. Last January, I was walking through Goodwill at around 3 in the afternoon. I normally go during the morning with all the other resellers and talk shop before it opens, but if I have an errand to run in the afternoon, I will generally swing by to see if anything new has been put on the shelves. If you're a reseller, this is a quick pro tip. Most new items are put out throughout the day and most resellers show up in the mornings. So if you occasionally swing by midday or closing time, you have a good chance of scoring a nice item or two. I saw this young college girl that was putting away items. We were friendly since I saw her most days. I asked her, "Anything cool come out?" These workers see the same crap day in, day out, and are generally a good source of info. Plus, small talk keeps you in good standing and in the loop if anything actually does come out. A few months prior, I was given a hot tip by one of the stock girls that a weird bracelet was on its way out and that I should wait around. I hung around another 30 minutes and she wasn't lying. The bracelet went straight to the glass case with all the other items of value were placed. I asked to see it and knew right away I had to have it. I bought the sterling silver bracelet for $19.99. Pretty hefty price for a sterling bracelet from Goodwill, but the metal content wasn't what I was interested in. The bracelet was made with silver dental fillings, all different and all unique fillings that once lined people's molars. Hard to believe? I know, but you could probably still find it online. The website WorthPoint generally archives sales records, and it did indeed sell for $300 not too long ago. I would love to know that person's story. Why buy a bracelet made of old dental fillings? To my amazement, she said, "There was this one thing, right over here," and she led me to the vase section. The vase section is not generally on my radar because 99% of the time the aisle is filled with glass flower vases and ones that were sold at Target and Hobby Lobby. This one right here, and she pointed to a beautiful robin's egg blue with gold gilding Maholika hand-painted lidded vase. It was gorgeous, and when I turned the vase upside down to see if there was a touch mark on it, I was beyond delighted to find the handwritten name Rorstrand. I knew the name well. Rorstrand makes a lot of extremely valuable porcelain pieces that can fetch thousands of dollars. But there was one other thing I knew as well. Vases don't have lids. Vases with lids are called urns. This wasn't the first urn I had purchased. The first urn I bought, I didn't actually know was an urn until I got home, and I went to open the top, which was stuck, and when I used a little grit, the top came off and my hands and lap were covered in dust and ash. I quickly put two and two together. So after I bought the urn, I stopped at the garbage can outside the front doors on my way to the car. I took my Benchmade knife from my pocket and slid the blade carefully along the tape holding the lid to the vase. I opened the urn and looked inside. There was a little ash residue that looked caked onto the inside. I can only imagine that the remains might have sat inside for years, through humidity and time, producing a thin layer that stuck to the walls until perhaps the Goodwill workers in back dumped the excess remains in the trash before it made its way to the floor. When I got home, I used some Clorox wipes to get the ash residue off the inside and place the urn in my light box to take a more professional-looking photo. After taking the photos, I wrapped the urn in bubble wrap and placed it in a tote in the back corner of my basement. When I got back upstairs, I sat down on my computer to look up the date, which was easy enough given the touch mark on the bottom. The urn was made in 1874. Then I had to decide on a price and what others were selling at. There were no urns, but there were other pieces like vases and statues, so I priced it high. $3,000 seemed legit. Here's another hot tip. A lot of sellers on eBay price things really high when they are unsure to let buyers make offers to help them gauge what a realistic price is to accept is. So if you find a rare piece and are interested, send an offer, and if it is denied, wait a week or two and then send it again. It never hurts to ask. I listed the urn and had to get ready for my son's birthday. He was turning 3. My wife had given me a list of things that needed to be done, and the first was to pick up the cake and the balloons. I shot over to Party City and got a half dozen random colored balloons and a metallic mirror-like balloon with Pooh Bear printed on the front. When I got back home, we got everything ready for the party, and it was life as we knew it. I made no mention to my wife about the urn. A week later, my wife calls me while I'm out making my thrift store rounds. "This is going to sound weird, but I think the balloon is following me," she said. "Come on, what are you talking about?" I replied. "Every time I go to another room, it follows me there." "It follows you there?" I say in a condescending tone. "Like I said at the beginning, I don't believe in this shit. Not right away, but yeah. I was in our room, and it was in our room. When I got done with my shower, it was in Dylan's room, and when I was making lunch, I turned around, and it was in the living room." "That's weird," I said, "but I gotta go. I just pulled up to this place, and I have to get in there. I'll be home soon, you can show me then." I didn't think that there was anything to be worried about. The heat was on, and the balloon was doing one of those, I still have helium, but I'm losing it, so I'm starting to sink things. Plus, my wife watched ghost shows and believed in that type of stuff. Not me. The following morning was Saturday. Shauna had to work. She was a nurse and worked 12-hour shifts. When I got up, she was gone. Dylan and I played basketball the whole morning on one of those Fisher-Price hoops. I did this every year around March Madness. After lunch, I put Dylan down for a nap. While in the kitchen filling my cup with water, I looked over at the balloon. It was attached to a string and floated waist high. I gave it a little smack as I walked by. I chuckled and said, "I dare you to follow me." I want to be very clear here. This was not a real dare. I didn't have a belief that anything would happen. It was more as though I was talking out loud in reference to how ridiculous that call was yesterday. I laid down on the couch and closed my eyes and took a nap. I woke up to the sound of my son crying. I opened my eyes. I could feel the warmth of my breath off the back of the couch. "I'm coming, buddy," I yelled. As I rolled over, my gaze fell oddly onto my own distorted, distant reflection. I was looking directly into the back of the mirrored balloon. A cold shiver ran up my back and into my skull. I looked around. There was nothing. Everything was quiet and nothing out of place. My son was still crying, so I batted the balloon away and walked down the hall. I could see my son's doorway from the couch. When I got to his door and peered in, I could see he was still in his crib. I know, he's 3 and still in a crib. He has a big boy bed, but he refuses to sleep in it. I actually had already taken down the crib, but had to put it back up to get him out of my room. I called Shauna. "You are never going to believe what happened," I told her. It was sure as shit odd, but I wasn't convinced. There was half wall separating the kitchen and the living room. Perhaps it just floated over when the heat kicked on, I told myself. Looking back on it, there is no way to explain the balloon, which had been floating waist high, to somehow either float up and over the half wall, or down around the hall and into the living room, then over the couch, and to drop below waist height to be directly in my face when I woke up. After I got Dylan up, I popped the balloon and Dylan and I walked it down to the trash. We spent the rest of the day at Grandma and Grandpa's house. By the time we got home, it was Dylan's bedtime. I put him to bed and smoked a little weed and got into bed myself. Shauna got home at 8:30, but I was already asleep. Shauna and I were thrust awake to the sound that I can only describe as someone breaking every plate, dish, and glass we owned all at once. "What the fuck was that?" We both looked at each other. There are very few times when a man has to be a man and check this on a sound at night. But let me tell you, it is never an easy thing to do. Your mind isn't fully awake, yet you are trying to and need to be able to function on overdrive at a moment's notice. I grabbed the only weapon I had, a 12-inch nutcracker from my dresser that my aunt had given me when I was 10. I opened the door and peered down the hall. The living room glowed a pale blue from the moonlight entering the sliding glass door. I could see from where I was much of the living room and kitchen, but there were blind spots, like on either side of the hall entrance and towards the front foyer. I went through every nook and cranny, opening hall closets, checking Dylan's room and behind the couches, even the basement. There was nothing out of place. It dawned on me that maybe a cabinet shelf gave way and broke inside the cabinet. Nope. Not a glass was moved, not a plate was chipped. I made my way back to bed. I looked at the clock. It was 3:15 a.m. Neither of us knew what to make of it. It didn't make any sense. The next evening, after Shauna and I put Dylan to bed, we sat on the couch watching one of the housewife shows. Out of the top right corner of my eye, I saw a white cloak-like figure scurry across the ceiling from the bathroom across the hall and into my son's room. My brain didn't want to acknowledge what I just saw. I paused for a moment, deciding whether or not to mention it. "Did you see that?" I asked Shauna. I looked over. I could see Shauna was clutching a throw pillow rather tightly and looking in the hallway direction. The white thing in the hall? As I write this, I'm getting the same goosebumps all over the back of my triceps and around to my back and neck. There's no way I could ever paint a picture that would fully describe to you what it's like to see something so unbelievably unbelievable, only to have it validated by the person next to you. I jumped up and ran to Dylan's room. There was nothing there. That night I told Shauna about the urn. "That's not staying here," she said. I agreed and told her I would take it to our lockbox in the morning. I had a lockbox at the bank for the gold and silver, and this would fit fine inside. That night I couldn't sleep. I am not one to suffer from insomnia. I usually fall asleep with ease. But it was one of those nights that every time I closed my eyes, a new dark thought would lunge into my brain. Every dark thought that one could imagine, from accidentally running over my son in our driveway to burning alive and smelling my own flesh. The next morning, we woke up to the sound of our son talking to someone in his room. Shauna went in and asked, "Who are you talking to, Dylan?" "Grandpa," Dylan said. This one still puzzles me. Both of Dylan's grandpas are still alive. Did he mean he was talking to an older man? Or was he just pretending, just being a silly little 3-year-old? I don't know, but given the week we had, I grabbed the urn and headed down to the bank. When I got home, I dropped the price of the urn down to $800 and it sold the next day to a Princeton University professor. I still don't believe in psychics, and I try not to think about what happened. So why write about this now? I just found out the professor killed himself 2 weeks after he got the Rorstrand urn.